You're going to get us both sent from this fort. Or worse, get him hanged for a fool's crime he barely committed yet. Is it already too late to stop? Probably. You're go-
In a small kingdom on the edge of the Thar Desert, there stood a fort the color of old honey. Within its walls lived a court musician named Mira, and beyond them, in the soldiers' quarters, a young guard named Arjun. This is not a story about a kingdom, or a war, or a throne, though all three will pass through it. It is a story about a window and the 40 years someone spent standing at it. But before we reach the window, we should understand the fort itself, because a secret like theirs does not survive in a place like this by accident. The fort was small as desert kingdoms went, but it ran on the same currency every court runs on: attention. Everyone watched everyone. Servants watched nobles for favor. Nobles watched the king for position. Guards watched the gates, and above all, watched each other, since a soldier who reported another soldier's failing was a soldier likely to be promoted in his place. Into this arrangement, musicians occupied a strange position. They were essential. No royal feast, no diplomatic visit, no wedding of state was complete without them, and yet they were also, in the eyes of the court, barely people at all. Skilled instruments themselves, valued and displayed, rarely asked their own opinions. Mira had lived this way since she was 7 years old, when a traveling teacher recognized something in her voice and arranged, with her family's uneasy blessing, for her to be trained at the fort. By the time she was 20, she was the finest sarangi player the kingdom had produced in a generation. She was also, by her own private reckoning, one of the loneliest people within its walls. Arjun arrived at the fort 2 years later, one of several young men recruited from outlying villages after a border skirmish left the kingdom's garrison thin. He was not from a soldiering family. His father farmed millet on land that rarely gave enough of it, and Arjun had joined the guard mostly because it fed him more reliably than his father's fields did. He was posted, in his first weeks, to the night rotation nearest the music hall, considered among the guards a dull assignment. Since nothing of consequence ever happened there, Arjun did not find it dull. He found instead that the sound drifting from behind the sandstone screens made the long, empty hours pass differently than he expected. He did not know, for the first several weeks, that the sound belonged to a person at all. It simply arrived each evening like weather expected, and somehow, still surprising every time. Before we go further, it's worth meeting the one person at the fort who truly knew Mira, not the court's version of her, but the private one. Her name was Kavita, a tabla player 2 years Mira's senior, sharp-tongued and fiercely protective, who had shared Mira's small quarters since they were both children in training. It was Kavita who first noticed the change in Mira that winter, a distractedness during rehearsal, a habit of glancing toward the courtyard windows at odd hours. Kavita did not need to be told what or who was behind it. She had lived beside Mira, long enough to read her the way Mira read music. "You're going to get us both sent from this fort," Kavita told her one evening, not unkindly, or worse. "Get him hanged for a fool's crime he barely committed yet." Mira did not deny it. She simply asked Kavita, quietly, whether she thought it was already too late to stop. Kavita, after a long silence, said that she thought it probably was. What began between Mira and Arjun was small and careful, the way things must be when they are forbidden. A court musician did not speak with soldiers. A soldier did not so much as glance too long at a musician kept for kings. But the fort had a stepwell at its edge, unused after dark, where the air was cooler and the walls muffled sound. Mira would say she was practicing alone. Arjun would say he was checking the perimeter. Neither of these was entirely a lie in the beginning. They spoke of small things at first: her training, his village, the strange shapes clouds made over the desert in the weeks before monsoon season. He told her about his father's millet fields, the taste of the rain when it finally broke a summer's drought. She told him about the discipline of her training, the particular ache of playing for rooms full of people who never once looked directly at her. It was months before either of them said anything that could not be explained away if someone had asked. And when Arjun finally did clumsily, he'd admit later, fumbling over words he'd rehearsed for a week, Mira did not answer him with words at all. She simply played, for the first time, a melody of her own composition, unlike anything performed in the royal halls. He understood it as the answer it was. Arjun, too, had someone who knew. His closest friend among the guard was a broad-shouldered soldier named Devraj, recruited from the same district and bunked beside him since their first week at the fort. Where Kavita's protectiveness toward Mira came sharpened with worry, Devraj's toward Arjun came wrapped in teasing. The musician, Devraj would say, grinning whenever Arjun grew quiet and distant near dusk, "You're going to lose your head over her, and I mean that in the entirely literal sense the Diwan would prefer." He said it lightly, but he meant the warning inside it. Devraj had seen, more than once, what happened to soldiers who overstepped the fort's invisible boundaries: reassignment to distant, dangerous postings, dismissed as though the punishment were incidental rather than intended. Still, when Arjun asked him, quietly, to cover his post twice a week so he could slip to the stepwell unnoticed, Devraj agreed without much more argument than the teasing required. Loyalty, in men like Devraj, rarely needed to be asked for twice. Every court has its watchers, and the fort's sharpest belonged to the Diwan, Prabhat Rai, the king's chief administrator, a man whose entire value to the crown rested on knowing things before they became problems. He had not survived 3 decades in his position by missing details. He noticed that spring that Mira's playing had changed, not worsened. If anything, it had deepened, gained a texture it hadn't carried before. He noticed, too, a guard who requested the same dull night posting with unusual consistency, and requested it, more than once, be swapped conveniently around the same evenings. The musician claimed to be practicing alone. The Diwan said nothing to anyone. He simply began watching more closely, the way a man watches a locked door he suspects has been opened and closed more than once, testing for the wear only repetition leaves behind. That same season brought a second complication, one with no villain in it at all, only ordinary bad timing. A wealthy cloth merchant, taken with Mira's reputation and, more plainly, her beauty, petitioned the court for permission to take her as a second wife. It was, by every practical measure available to a woman in Mira's position, a remarkable offer: security, status, a household of her own rather than a shared room with Kavita for the rest of her working years. The court, eager to please a merchant whose trade routes benefited the kingdom's treasury, made its approval of the match clear without technically ordering it. Mira delayed her answer as long as courtesy allowed, citing her training obligations, her devotion to her craft, anything that might buy time without giving offense to a man who had done her no wrong beyond wanting her. Kavita, practical as ever, urged her at least to consider it seriously. "You cannot marry a window," Kavita told her, more bluntly than she usually allowed herself. Mira did not have an answer for that, either only the quiet, stubborn certainty that she would rather remain unmarried than marry anyone who was not the man she could not marry at all. It was inevitable, perhaps, that suspicion this patient would eventually act. One evening, the Diwan followed at a careful distance and reached the edge of the stepwell just as Mira and Arjun stepped apart, not touching, not embracing, simply standing closer together than any explanation could easily account for. He said nothing that night. He only looked at them both for a long moment, the way a man looks at a debt he intends to collect eventually, and walked on. Neither Mira nor Arjun slept that night. They both understood, without needing to discuss it, that they had been given a warning rather than a punishment, and that the warning would not be repeated a second time. It was Kavita, the next morning, who suggested the only path forward that made any sense: distance, discretion, and patience, until whatever attention the Diwan was paying them faded onto some other, more urgent problem at court. Fortunately for them, and unfortunately for the kingdom, that problem arrived within the month. War came to the kingdom's northern border that summer. Not a large war, not one that history books would remember, but large enough that every able soldier was called to march, Arjun and Devraj among them. For the court, the timing was a relief of its own strange kind. The Diwan's attention turned entirely toward troop counts, supply lines, and the king's mounting anxiety, leaving no room in his considerable focus for a musician and a soldier who, in a matter of days, would be separated by more effective means than any court punishment could arrange. Mira understood this bitter irony better than anyone. The war that threatened to take Arjun from her permanently was, in its own way, the only thing currently protecting them both.
The night before the garrison marched, Arjun came to the stepwell one final time, Devraj covering his post without needing to be asked. He did not ask Mira to wait. He knew, as she did, that a musician of the court could not be seen waiting for anyone, least of all a soldier who might not return, and least of all one already under a Diwan's watchful suspicion. Instead, he told her that if he lived, he would find a way back to that window above the music hall. The one with the sandstone lattice, the one she practiced beside each evening. He would stand below it once, so she would know, without either of them needing to risk another word. That was the only promise either of them made. Mira played him the melody once more, quietly, the one composed for no audience but him, and Arjun memorized it the way a soldier memorizes the terrain of a place he intends to return to, whatever it costs him. The march north took 11 days through terrain that grew harsher with every mile, the fertile land near the fort giving way to scrubland, then to the kind of open desert where water was rationed as carefully as ammunition. Devraj kept Arjun talking through the worst of it, as he had a habit of doing, filling silences that might otherwise fill themselves with worry. He asked, one night by the campfire, whether Arjun regretted any of it. The risk, the secrecy, the promise made at a stepwell that might never be kept. Arjun considered the question honestly before answering. He said that regret required believing you'd had a better option available, and he did not believe, even now, that he had. Whatever came of the war, he told Devraj, he would rather have spent 2 years knowing Mira than a lifetime not having. Devraj, not a man given easily to sentiment, said only that Arjun had better live long enough to prove that particular philosophy correct. The engagement that ended Arjun's part in this story was not, by military record, a significant one, a border skirmish, fought at night, against a raiding party larger than the kingdom's scouts had estimated. It lasted less than 2 hours. It was, in the confusion particular to night fighting, a battle in which entire units lost track of each other within minutes. Devraj would later tell what he knew, though it was little enough. He and Arjun had been separated early, pushed apart by the collapse of their formation's left flank. Devraj survived the night in a shallow ravine with 4 other soldiers. He did not see Arjun fall. He did not see him survive either. When the skirmish ended and the surviving column regrouped at dawn, Arjun simply was not among them, and no body bearing his description was recovered from the field. It was the kind of ending war gives more often than any story would prefer, not a clean death to mourn, and not a certain survival to celebrate. Only an absence and the unbearable arithmetic of not knowing which kind of absence it was. The surviving column returned within the month, greeted with the relief every homecoming earns. Devraj, true to the loyalty he'd shown Arjun in life, found a way to bring the news to Mira himself rather than let it reach her secondhand through fort gossip, though he could offer her nothing more certain than what he'd told his commanding officers. He did not tell her Arjun was dead. He could not, honestly, tell her that. He told her only what was true. That no one had seen him fall, and no one had seen him escape, and that the desert north of the border swallowed men in both directions with equal indifference. It was, in its way, a crueler gift than certainty would have been. Certainty, at least, permits grief to finish its work. What Mira was given instead was permission to hope, indefinitely, with no obligation on the part of the world to ever resolve it. Mira returned to her post at the lattice window above the music hall the following evening, and every evening after. Kavita sat with her some nights, saying little, understanding that her presence mattered more than any words she might offer. The Diwan, whatever suspicion he had once carried, seemed to lose interest entirely in the matter now that its dangerous half had marched off to war and failed, by any account, to return. Whether this was mercy or simple indifference, no one at the fort ever determined. Mira was, in any case, left alone to wait, which was the only thing by then she wanted from the court at all. She continued her training duties. She continued performing when required. But each evening, without exception, she returned to the same window and stayed there until well past the hour any reasonable person would have given up expecting anything. 10 years passed, then 20. What follows is not one continuous grief, but a series of smaller ones, each arriving and settling into something Mira learned, slowly, to carry rather than resist. In the 3rd year, a merchant's caravan passed through with a soldier's ring, found near the northern border and sold twice before someone thought to ask whether the fort might want it back. It was not Arjun's ring. Mira knew this the moment she saw it, though she paid the merchant for it anyway, and kept it in a small box beside her window for reasons she never fully explained even to Kavita. In the 7th year, the merchant who had once sought her hand married another woman and sent Mira, unexpectedly, a length of fine cloth as a wedding courtesy rather than a slight. She wove a small part of it into a cushion for the window seat. It seemed, to her, a fitting use for a kindness that had cost her nothing and asked for nothing in return. In the 12th year, the Diwan Prabhat Rai died of an ordinary illness, and Mira found herself surprised by a small, complicated grief of her own, not for the man's watchfulness, but for the strange intimacy of having been so thoroughly, silently understood by someone who had never once spoken his understanding aloud. In the 18th year, Devraj visited the fort one final time, older now, a farmer himself, passing through on family business. He sat with Mira at the window for an afternoon and told her, gently, everything he remembered of that last march, the campfire conversation, Arjun's unshaken certainty that 2 years of knowing her had been worth whatever came after. He did not offer her false comfort. He offered her, instead, the simple gift of a witness. Someone else who had known Arjun well enough to grieve him properly. Meera trained musicians of her own by then, younger women who found in her a teacher stricter than she was warm, though the warmth was there, quiet and consistent, for those who stayed close enough to notice it. Among them was a girl named Lakshmi, 12 years old when she arrived, who would stay closer to Meera than any student before her, and who would, without either of them planning it, become the keeper of a story neither of them yet knew would need keeping. Lakshmi was not, at first, an exceptional student, competent, disciplined, but without the particular spark that separates a skilled musician from a remarkable one. What she had instead was attentiveness, a habit of noticing what her teacher did not explain. She noticed, within her first year at the fort, that Meera played one particular melody only at the window, only in the evenings, and never during formal instruction. She noticed that Meera paused, every single year, on the day the first monsoon clouds gathered, and stood a little longer at the lattice than usual. Lakshmi was not, at first, an exceptional student, competent, disciplined, but without the particular spark that separates a skilled musician from a remarkable one. What she had instead was attentiveness, a habit of noticing what her teacher did not explain. She noticed, within her first year at the fort, that Meera played one particular melody only at the window, only in the evenings, and never during formal instruction. She noticed that Meera paused, every single year, on the day the first monsoon clouds gathered, and stood a little longer at the lattice than usual. She never asked directly what the melody meant, sensing correctly that some questions are gifts only when they're never actually posed. She simply learned it, note for note, by ear, over years of quiet observation, until she could play it herself without a single lesson ever having been given. It was, though neither of them named it as such, the beginning of an inheritance. In her 63rd year, during a monsoon heavier than any the fort had seen in a decade, Meera was found at the lattice window by Lakshmi, now grown, who had come to check on her teacher as she did every stormy evening by then. She was seated calmly, sarangi in her lap, eyes closed, as though listening to something just beyond the rain. She had passed peacefully in her sleep sometime in the night, the storm still rolling outside. Lakshmi would later say that for one strange moment before she understood what had happened, she thought she'd heard two voices in the room, her teacher's familiar melody, and beneath it, something lower, unfamiliar, matching it note for note. It was, she said afterward, almost certainly only the wind through the lattice. Almost. The fort still stands today, weathered by centuries of desert wind. Most of its history has faded into records few people read anymore: kings, wars, borders redrawn and redrawn again, diwans and merchants and soldiers whose names survive only in ledgers no one consults. But the musicians' quarters remain, and so, remarkably, does the lattice window above them. Lakshmi taught the melody to her own students in turn, and they to theirs, until it became, over generations, simply a piece of the fort's traditional repertoire, its true origin softened into legend, then into the kind of story locals tell visitors more for its charm than its accuracy. Local guides will still mention, if asked, the court musician who waited at that window for a soldier who never returned. And the custom, unbroken for longer than anyone can now trace, of lighting a small lamp in that same window on the night of the year's first monsoon. No one fully agrees anymore on who started the tradition. Ask an elder in the nearby village, though, and most will tell you the same thing, without much need for elaboration. They'll tell you the window is still waiting to be seen from below. Just once. That's all it ever asked for. If this story stayed with you, there are more waiting across the old kingdoms and quiet corners of folklore, some as gentle as this one, some far less so. Subscribe for more forgotten folklore every week.